New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. What if you had a place to return to every day for peace, clarity, and connection? The New Thought Ministry of Prayer offers live morning and evening prayer, along with a growing library you can access anytime. This is a space for reflection, renewal, and real spiritual practice, rooted in the understanding that something greater is already alive within you. You are welcome here. Join us live or watch anytime. The New Thought Ministry of Prayer, part of the New Thought Media Network. Come, take a moment for what matters most.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Inclusive Church. My name is Dr. Tracy Brown, and I am so glad that you have decided to join in today as we talk about all things inclusive in our different kinds of churches. Why is it important to be inclusive? What does it mean to be inclusive? What can I do to encourage others to be inclusive? On this show, we talk about all of that and more. A couple of things that I try on a regular basis to remind myself and everyone. I am intentionally using the word church because if we have not been reminded of anything else, we were reminded through COVID and the pandemic that the church is not a piece of property. Church is actually a gathering of people who are coming together to learn, to practice, to teach, and to embody key or core spiritual principles and spiritual practices. So I am using church in the context of a church being many different kinds of people coming together with a common cause to share common values and spiritual principles. And the other thing that I want to remind you of is that I will refer to leader a number of times. And when I'm saying leaders in our churches, I am not limiting that definition of leaders to ministers. I believe that everyone who is contributing in a conscious and intentional way to the growth and the sustainability of a church that these are the leaders we rely on. And it's so important for all leaders to be educated about and to be committed to embracing diversity and creating an environment of inclusion. So that's the reminder for today. And what are we talking about? The last few weeks have been thinking about and talking about what do we do to get more young adults involved in, engaged in our churches. And this is not something that is a discussion that is only happening in New Thought. It is happening in all kinds of churches and spiritual belief systems. And we are not an exception to that. So if you want to say hello in the chat or in the comment section, depending upon what platform you're on, then I would love to know who's out there chiming in today. I know that it's more than just me and Anita. Hello, Anita, because I can see you all out there on LinkedIn and on YouTube and on a couple of different Facebook channels. So it's not required, but if you'd like to say hello or share where you're viewing from, that would be great as we dive in. So this theme, more young adults, please, is not coincidental. And I know the banner said that we are focusing on this in July, but there was a week in July when I was in Mexico. And so we're carrying over into the beginning of August for today's conversation. And if you haven't been able to connect in with the previous ones, don't forget, you can always go to our archives on whatever site you're viewing on right now, or maybe if it's more than just in the last week, the easiest site might be going to YouTube, because then it might be easier to find it. And then I also, at the end of the show today, will put this up as well, where you can just scan the QR code and go to a playlist where you can find previously recorded sessions. What are we talking about today? Young adults aren't the future of the church. They are the church right now. And I wanted to make sure that the last episode in the series was really focused on leadership, which is what I talk about so often, how we as leaders can talk about, can model, can hold others accountable for being inclusive. We have this commitment, and it takes work. It really requires us to be conscious of what it is that we say is important, and are we modeling that? And so moving from just talking about inclusion to really having shared leadership, some of us have thought a lot about and even done a lot about that as it relates to race and ethnicity. And then there are some churches that have done a significant amount related to shared leadership and visibility in leadership based on sexual orientation and gender identity. One of the areas where very few churches have done a good job is having shared leadership with people from different age groups. And today I'm going to specifically focus on our young adults. And all 4 weeks of the series, we have defined young adults as 21 through 45-ish. So, and a lot of the examples I've used have been, mid 20s to mid to late 40s. So that will be the same today. As I'm saying young adults, I'm thinking about people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And a couple of weeks ago, we really did hone in on that's not one demographic group that to be truly effective, you will probably need to focus on one of those 3 decades. People who are in their 20s, young adults who are in their 30s, young adults who are in their 40s, because their needs are very different. So go back 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and I shared certain patterns with different age groups within the broader demographic. So I'll keep that in mind as we focus in on leadership today as well. So many churches invite young adults to attend, create special services or events for young adults, um, have a young adult ministry that meets on a Friday night or a Sunday afternoon. We create programming for the young adults, but not as many churches actually invite young adults into important, significant, and meaningful leadership roles. We hesitate to trust them with meaningful influence on how the overall church is running or the programs and the themes that go throughout the year. And so the healthiest churches are the churches that are doing a really good job with intergenerational or having involvement and engagement of people from many different generations. They're intentionally creating pathways into leadership, right? Using input from young adults to be more innovative, really looking at the governance structure and where are there places to trust or to include the young adult perspectives in governance and of course in the ministry itself. And so today I'm going to just share some insights I've had from asking different questions, from talking to different people, of course, from thinking about it myself. But how can we mentor younger adults into leadership? What are some things we want to keep in mind that actually are a win-win for the young adults and for the ministry? And so there's some general categories like shared leadership. We say that we share leadership, but I know that many of the churches that I work with or that I get inquiries from, they are not sharing leadership. They are still using, modeling, and holding on to the old model where the senior minister, you're in their world and they are calling all the shots and they are having to approve everything, and the talk topics and the events are the things that that person has either thought of or is comfortable with. And that minister centric model has a place, and it may not work for you if the minister that the model is built around is very comfortable or very controlling and simply is not willing to take risks of having input from people who think differently than they do, who have different preferences and experiences than they do, and have different cultural norms. So shared leadership is a very valuable place because shared leadership does mean that you are engaging lots of different kinds of people, even though it does not mean that everyone gets to do everything their way. There's leadership, there's sharing in the prioritization and the strategy that is created around the ministry. An ideal place to be thinking about including young adults in leadership is anything that you're doing that is about innovating, coming up with a new idea, because their input may not have been included in the past. And so you will get ideas. Also, if you don't have a lot of young adults who have influenced what you are doing up until now, this is a group that has been exposed to technology in a different way, that has not control, but comfort and confidence with technology. And so, especially the younger in the young adult category they are, the more new and fresh ideas they are going to bring. Succession planning. Oh my goodness. What would you do if 5 of the key leaders in your community all left within a 3-month period? Do you have bench strength? Do you have people from all age groups who have been exposed to your meditation ministry or to your hospitality ministry, your greeters, right? When you look at the different volunteer groups you have in your church, every one of them should have one or more one or more people who are under the age of 40. And by being a part of the ministry, they are learning how it's done now, but they also can be developed to be the bridge to what you do in the future. So they're offering their input into what you do now and coming up with a different way to do it or a way to enhance it. And if you're smart, you're also preparing them to be an assistant team lead or the next team lead, depending on what aspect of the ministry it is. So when we say leadership and really bringing young adults into leadership, I'm not saying that next week or next month, you have to appoint a 25-year-old to be the chair of your board of directors or your core council or your leadership council, whatever you call your board of trustees or your primary leadership and governance group. If you're thinking that, it's like, oh, wait a minute, slow down. It's not all or nothing. It's not everyone over 60 or now you're telling me it has to be someone under 25. Remember, young adults for this conversation range in age from 21 to mid to late 40s. And someone who is 45 may be your next board chair because they may have spent the last 20 years from college until now in corporate settings where they are key leaders, division managers, vice presidents, and they may actually have the leadership skills that you need to chair your board. Whereas someone who's 25 or 28 might have the skills, depending on their background, depending on the size of your church, depending on how many teams you have and how long you've been in existence. But they also may be the people you're bringing in now and beginning to groom. So shared leadership, innovation, succession planning, mentoring, two-way mentoring. Some people call this reverse mentoring, but I actually don't encourage that. It's two-way mentoring. I want to be mentored by someone who is 30 who can tell me about and show me what's important to people who are in their late 20s and early 30s who can educate me about the musical trends and maybe some of the language that is used and important. And I may be mentoring them on not just the difference in cultural values based on age group, but also in helping them understand how to bridge the gap. So I'm bridging the gap, they're bridging the gap, and the church benefits. So mutual mentoring of between people who are in different age groups is another way to create leadership relationships, um, and intergenerational collaboration. Some of you have heard me refer to this example before, but it is one of my favorites. At my home spiritual community in Dallas, we have a circle or a group of people who are 55 and older, and they meet on a regular basis. And we, at the time of this example, had a group of young adults, 35 and younger. And the majority of them were between 27 and 33 or 34. And those two groups decided for one of their regular meetings, they would come together, and the younger people would talk about questions they have about applying spiritual principle in their lives, and the older participants would talk about examples where they have used spiritual principle to guide their lives. And that's kind of how it started. Like, we're the young people, we're going to learn from the older people. And the older people had real questions about what was going on in the world and how younger adults were processing it, and then that led to spiritual principle. And everyone in the group, the youngers and the olders, raved for a year, like for 9 months, about that was the best meeting they had all year. And then they started planning this to be an annual time where they would come together. But they didn't just come together for that kind of annual gathering of the minds, because what happened was, since they had shared stories with each other, examples of how they had applied spiritual beliefs and spiritual practices in their individual lives, when they would see each other at the annual meeting, or when they would cross paths in the church, like in the lobby after Sunday service, or if there was an Wednesday meditation, and I showed up and I saw this person who was in that conversation, all of a sudden there is authentic connection happening between people. And there were follow-ups between some of the members, like, how is that working for you? Or tell me more about how that played out. And so that intergenerational collaboration of existing ministries actually served to build relationships. So, what are the biggest mistakes that we make as it relates to including young adults in leadership? Well, we tell people this almost makes me cry. I can feel the emotion welling up every time I say it. When I hear that some young adult who's in their mid 30s is told, well, you haven't lived long enough yet. And their experience is totally discounted. And they've learned lessons from whatever experiences they have had, not just in their personal lives, but in their work lives, right? In being a citizen who has to elect, or doesn't have to, but who chooses to vote in every election, right? They have experiences, and all of us do. So telling someone to wait until they're older or really telling them in no uncertain terms, oh, you haven't lived long enough to have any experience that is valuable to us here in this community. Sit back and watch. Big, huge mistake. Another big, huge mistake we make is getting so locked into our traditions and the ways that we have done things in the past that we are protecting the tradition instead of designing or choosing based on what we have identified as our purpose and our priorities. Your church may have something that you've done every year for the last 25 years. And even though attendance has been decreasing and decreasing and decreasing over the last 10 years, you're holding on to it because it was created 40 years ago, 25 years ago, by someone who was important or the minister at the time, and we must do it. And what happens is two things. One, we disenfranchise our younger adults from bringing new ideas. And also, what we are teaching our young adults is that tradition is more important than timeliness. Tradition is more important than relevance. Tradition is more important than what may be meaningful to the people who are in our church right now. A third big mistake, for me, this falls into the category of assuming my experience is better than your creativity. So sometimes someone may not have the same experience or as much experience as I have because I've lived many, many more decades than they have. But they are looking at what we're trying to do or listening to what we say is important with very different ears. And if they're a creative person, and I don't just mean performing arts or visual arts creative, although that applies too, but they may have a creative way of resolving a problem that we're facing that I would never think of. And so creativity to come up with a different solution is always as important, if not more important, than relying on experience. And last but not least, and this is a big one in my opinion, we mistake respect or we define respect as conformity. Well, you are suggesting something new. You don't respect our way of doing it. No, that's just digging in and being unwilling to consider something different. I actually have been in situations where people expected me to conform to their mediocrity when, in order to demonstrate that I respect them. And I don't generally, as a rule, generally, I don't do that anymore because if I see it's mediocrity, that's not what I want to attach my reputation to. I want to attach my reputation and my engagement with excellence. And so if the way that they interpret respect is, well, you are disrespecting me if you are not conforming to the what makes me comfortable or the way that we've done this for the last 25 years. That's not respect. That might be control. That might be a lot of other things, but it is not a demonstration of respect in an environment where we say we are committed to being inclusive. So those are the big mistakes, like telling somebody they're not old enough, they don't have enough experience yet, protecting old traditions just because instead of really thinking about and considering, is it in alignment with our purpose and what else could we do that's also in alignment with our purpose and our priorities. Number three, assuming that experience is better than a creative approach. And number four, demanding conformity as a way of showing respect. So I'm going to close out with some ideas that I have about where are the opportunities in our churches to really invite and engage young adults. And I've thought a lot about this over the last couple of years, partially because I'm getting older and I'm constantly looking around for who is somebody who could step into what I've been doing and how can I prepare them to do that. And it's not because I feel like I'm so old and I need to sit down and not do anything anymore. It's just that I realize that, yes, I am older and I want to see my ministries continue beyond my physical presence or my physical energy level. And that might be 20 years from now that I'm stepping back. But the person who is 35 now, I could be training them. And when they're 55, they're doing everything I am doing and more. So I've been thinking about this a lot recently. And so I do think that maybe the one of the easy things to do is I might not have someone who is in their 20s or early 30s be ready to step into a board chair position, but they're not going to be ready unless I have had them or mentored them or groomed them because they have chaired smaller committees or committees that are doing something very discreet. And if they've chaired 3 or 4 different committees in my church, they're more prepared to serve on the board because they understand what it takes to run the church from different perspectives. So I'm a real advocate for getting our young adults into committee chair roles as often as possible. Or maybe it's committee co-chair roles so that they get to learn and develop the skills. I am a big advocate for involving young adults in leading classes or discussion groups. And if they're not deeply grounded in our spiritual teaching, then I want to pair them with someone who is a practitioner or a licensed unity teacher or a minister so that they get the experience of leading and teaching, but they don't bear the full burden of having to answer the spiritual questions. And they are learning how to incorporate the spirituality into whatever it is they are doing. A lot of churches I've talked to have tapped their young adults to run their social media strategy or to develop graphics and design so that it will reach or be relevant to people who are in their age groups, to actually teach leaders and staff in the church, having young adults teach staff or teach other volunteer leaders about social media, about artificial intelligence, about the many technology tools and resources that we all should be using if we want our ministries to reach and engage people from different age groups. If you have someone in your community who is a very good speaker, then I would encourage you to schedule them to speak, to bring the message on a Sunday or bring the message on a weekday evening, or to bring the message at a special event that you're having. Because showing that this person is a skilled speaker and it does have a message that we can learn from is one of the best ways to teach your entire church members, all the members of the church, to recognize and value excellence and education from people of all age groups. So those are some of the things. How do you put them out front in ways that are visible? And how do you use our young adults behind the scenes to make the ministry stronger and to help grow the church? Whew. So I don't know, but I'm hoping one or two of these ideas is really resonating with you. And feel free to put in the chat if you have other ideas that I didn't mention, just trying to be aware of the time. But if you have a suggestion to keep in mind, I'd love to see it as well. Throughout all 4 episodes of this series, there have been a few themes that I keep going back to. Having young adults in our communities in meaningful ways is not a problem to solve, right? It's something that we can constantly and consistently affirm that our young adults are here and are already demonstrating the values that we teach in New Thought. We need to remember that our young adults tend to seek authenticity over authority, authentic relationships, authentic leadership over a hierarchical form of leadership and authority. They tend to value experience and demonstration over dogma. They care deeply about justice, about human dignity. And so anything or things you can do that are community outreach or that are making a difference in the world will attract many young adults. The expectation around diversity is just hardwired into many of the young adults who are involved in New Thought. There is an expectation that diversity, and not just based on race and ethnicity, but that they will see many different kinds of people and have the opportunity to engage with many different kinds of people as part of their experience in your church. Spiritual practice as the pathway to learning, understanding, and applying spiritual principle is huge with our 20 and 30-year-olds, especially. That it's the practice, it's the doing practice. And that just connects to, I don't want to hear a lot of dogma. I want to see the demonstration. So spiritual practice can be used effectively as the entryway, as the gateway into talking about the outcomes of practice representing the spiritual principles that we teach. And a lot of times with our older adults, their pathway was the opposite. Teach me the principle, the philosophy, and then I'll learn some spiritual practices to help me go deeper with that. Our younger adults, or you want to flip that script, you want to reverse that process. And the one final thing I want to bring up is if you are committed to bringing more young adults into your community, into your church, into leadership, then you must be prepared to have some difficult conversations. Our younger adults are not afraid to ask hard questions. Our younger adults are going to challenge the status quo, and they expect honest, authentic dialogue about that, not debate, not position, not I'm right and you're wrong, but let's dig into it. And in the church setting, what is it that our spiritual principles teach us about that? So this brings this series to a close. I know that in this entire show, week after week, month after month, year after year, we have talked about so many different kinds of inclusion or so many different identity groups. And all of us are members of more than one identity group. And one of those identity groups is related to our biological age. So let's not forget that when we are planning. Let's not forget that when we are marketing. Let's not forget that when we are communicating or resolving conflict. The invitation is for you and for me to simply make more room for the younger generations and to recognize them as equal partners in doing what we are all doing right now, which is shaping the future of new thought. My name is Tracy Brown. I am the host of the Inclusive Church, and I hope you've gotten some ideas about increasing the commitment and increasing the engagement of young adults in your church. Join me next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, right here on the New Thought Media Network for Inclusive Church. See you again soon.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.